She was sitting outside the hospital alone, April sunlight on her face, and she was crying. Not because she was weak, but because the man she loved more than anything in this world was lying in that building behind her. And the doctors had already stopped hoping. 2 years of fighting, 2 years of watching him fade. And now, the professor himself had told her, "Prepare yourself." So she sat on that bench. She let herself fall apart. Just for a moment, just where nobody could see her. But then, she heard voices. Around the corner, 2 nurses on a break. And one of them said a name. His name, Theodore. She froze. She stopped breathing. And what she heard next changed absolutely everything. Stay with me until the very end of this story. Because what happens, what this woman does next, it's the kind of thing you only read about. And the final twist, I promise you, you will not see it coming. If a story like this hits you somewhere deep, hit that like button right now. And subscribe. Because every single week, I bring you stories like this one. Real, human, and impossible to forget. Let me tell you about Vera. Not as a character in some story, but as a real woman. Someone you might know. Someone you might be. Vera loved spring. She genuinely, deeply loved it. The smell of warm earth after rain. The way fresh leaves caught the light. That feeling of everything starting over. She was the kind of person who noticed those things. Who stopped to feel them. She wasn't dramatic. She wasn't loud. She was just present. Warm. Completely, quietly devoted to the people she loved. And the person she loved most in the world was Fyodor. Her husband. Her person. The one who made sense of everything. They had met by accident, the way real love always seems to happen. A night out with friends. A noisy club. She was sitting alone at a table for just a moment. And this young man came over. Not smooth. Not practiced. Just honest. A gray t-shirt. Slightly messy hair. Those green eyes. And a smile that was almost shy. She felt it immediately. That pull. That quiet certainty. This one is different. He asked if he could sit. She said yes. And they talked like they'd known each other for years. No awkwardness. No performance. Just 2 people recognizing each other. His name was Fyodor. He had grown up in a children's home. No mother. No father. No family at all. Just himself. A set of rules. And a fierce determination to become something. And he had. By the time Vera met him, he had his own apartment. His own income. His own carefully built life. He was warm. Reliable. The kind of man who would run across a rainy city just to find a girl he'd spoken to for 20 minutes. Because he hadn't gotten her number, and the thought of never seeing her again was unbearable. He actually did that, by the way. That actually happened. She'll tell you about it with tears in her eyes even now. They got married. They built something beautiful. Not perfect, but real. There were hard years. Years of medical procedures. Of hope and heartbreak, of trying to become parents and failing again and again. But they held each other through all of it. Fyodor never once blamed her. Never once made her feel like less. He was just steady. And then one day he came home from work early. Pale. Breathless. Barely able to climb the stairs. And the life they had built together began to crack. Started small. The kind of thing you explain away. He's tired. He works too hard. He just needs rest. But Vera knew Fyodor. She knew what his energy looked like. She had watched this man come home from a 10-hour workday and immediately start fixing the kitchen shelf, or cooking a proper meal, or taking her out for a walk because the evening light was beautiful. He did not rest. He did not slow down. It was not in him. So when he started coming home and going straight to the couch, she noticed. When he started losing weight, she noticed. When bruises appeared on his arms with no explanation, she noticed. "You're going to the doctor," she told him. Not asked, told. "And do you know what he said?" He smiled. He said, "I was already going to. I just didn't want to worry you first." That was Fyodor, always protecting her, even when he was the one who needed protection. The diagnosis came back like a door slamming shut. A rare autoimmune blood disorder. His own immune system, the one that had kept him healthy his entire life, the one he had always joked about, was attacking him from the inside. There was no cure. There was treatment, supportive therapy, ways to slow it down, but not stop it. The doctor was honest. Gently, carefully, professionally honest. "This will be difficult to manage long-term." Vera stood in that office and felt the floor shift beneath her feet. She didn't cry. Not there. Not in front of the doctor. Not in front of Fyodor. She held his hand in the taxi home. She made tea. She sat across from him at the kitchen table, the same table where they had eaten 1,000 ordinary meals together, and she looked at his face. His familiar, beloved face. And she thought, "I will not lose him. I will not." Her parents mobilized everything they had. Every contact. Every connection. Her father worked the phones for 3 weeks straight. And finally, they got him an appointment with Professor Astafyev, one of the best specialists in the country. A man who had seen cases like this before. A man with real answers. Vera wept when her father called her with the news. Relief floods your body in the strangest way. It's almost like collapse. She truly believed, in that moment, that they had turned a corner. That Fyodor was in the right hands now. That this nightmare had a way out. But the disease had other plans. Weeks passed. Then months. Fyodor went from tired to exhausted to barely moving. He stopped working from the office. Then he stopped being able to work from home consistently. His clothes, the clothes that had fit him perfectly just 6 months ago, hung off him like they belonged to someone else. His face changed. The angles sharpened. The eyes, God, his eyes looked enormous. Beautiful still, but enormous. Sunken into a face that was becoming unfamiliar to her. She was losing him in slow motion, and there was nothing she could do but watch. Eventually, Professor Astafyev sat across from Vera, not Fyodor, Vera, and he said the words she had been dreading since the beginning. "The supportive therapy is becoming less effective. His vital signs are declining. We've heard nothing from the donor registry. And honestly, Vera," he paused, "the queues are very long." She sat very still. "You should prepare yourself." She nodded. She thanked him. She walked out of his office. She took the elevator down. She walked through the lobby. She pushed open the heavy hospital door. She sat down on a bench in the hospital courtyard. And she let herself fall apart. That day was the day we met her at the beginning of this story. Sitting on that bench. April sun. Fresh leaves. Her favorite season. And she was shattered. Completely shattered. Because upstairs in that building, the person who had given her the safest, most loved she had ever felt in her adult life was disappearing. She thought about the first night they walked together. He had taken her hand somewhere near the edge of a park. Just reached over and taken it, like it was the most natural thing in the world. She had thought, "Oh, so this is what this is supposed to feel like." She thought about the morning he proposed. How nervous he was. Fyodor, this solid, certain, unshakable man, nervous. His hands were trembling slightly. She had noticed. She had loved him even more for it. She thought about the years of trying for a baby, the procedures, the grief, the way he had finally held her face in his hands one evening and said, "Enough. No more hurting yourself. We have each other. That's enough." He meant it. She had believed him. She still believed him. But now she was sitting on this bench and the world felt like it was ending. She wiped her eyes. She took a breath. She looked at the sky. She told herself, okay, 5 more minutes. Then go back inside. Then be strong. 5 more minutes. And that's when she heard it. Voices. Around the corner. The corner of the building where the staff went for smoke breaks. She hadn't realized she'd sat so close to it. A little courtyard tucked against the wall. Benches. A small fountain. She couldn't see them, but she could hear them perfectly. 2 women. Hospital staff. She recognized their voices from Fyodor's floor. The kind of women who had probably done this job for 20 years. Who had seen everything. Who spoke about patience with the detached shorthand of people who have learned not to get too attached. Except right now, one of them said his name. Fyodor. Vera's whole body went still. She pressed herself closer to the wall. Listening. Poor Fyodor, the first woman said. A sigh. Young man. Good man. Sweet one. Said the second. Clearly not long now. They'll never find a donor for him. The indicators are too rare. Vera closed her eyes. She had heard all of this before. From doctors. From the professor himself. But somehow hearing it from these women, casually over cigarettes in the April sunshine, it landed differently. Heavier. More final. She wanted to step around that corner. She wanted to scream at them. How dare you write him off like that? He is still fighting. He is still here. But she stayed still. And then one of the women said something unexpected. Something that made Vera's heart lurch sideways. You know what's sad? No family. Not a single blood relative. Detský dom, said the other. Children's home. Exactly. And with his blood type, even if we found someone in the registry, the compatibility odds are a pause. A cigarette being tapped. And then, actually, I keep thinking about something. It's probably nothing. What? The village I go to on weekends. Sosnovka. There's a man there. I see him sometimes. Vera stopped breathing. And he really looks like our Fyodor. Not just a passing resemblance. Same face. Same build. Same way he holds himself. It's striking. A short silence. You think he's related? That's what I keep wondering. The coincidence seems too big. You should say something. To who? And what do I say? I think your patient has a look-alike in the countryside? Besides, the other woman. No, you're right. It's probably nothing. And then, just like that, they changed the subject. Tomato seedlings. Dinner plans. Weekend schedules. The conversation moved on. The way casual conversations do. As if they hadn't just, without knowing it, said the one sentence, the one small offhand sentence. That might be the difference between life and death. Vera sat against the wall for a long moment. She didn't move. She didn't breathe properly. Her mind was working fast. Sosnovka. She knew that name. She knew exactly why she knew it. Years ago, 5, maybe 6 years ago, Fyodor had hired private investigators. He'd wanted to find his birth family. Just to know. Just to understand where he came from. Vera had worried about it. She'd been afraid for him. Afraid of what he'd find. Afraid of disappointment. But Fyodor had said, it matters to know your roots, even if they're not what you'd want. The investigators had worked for months. Piece by piece, document by document, they had assembled something. And eventually they had found a name. His mother's name, Larissa Yevgenyevna Petrova. From a village called Sosnovka. Fyodor had gotten that far. And then he had stopped. He had paid the investigators and told them to close the case. Vera had asked him why. He'd said, I don't know. I got scared, I think. He had never explained more than that. She had accepted it. Let it go. Filed it away in the back of her mind. And now that name. That village. A man with Fyodor's face. Petrova. His mother's family name. She pushed herself up from the bench. Her legs were shaking slightly, but her hands were steady. For the first time in months, Vera felt something she had almost forgotten existed. Purpose. Direction. A door that just might be open. She walked back to the hospital entrance. Not to collapse, not to cry, but to make a plan. That evening, Vera sat at Fyodor's bedside. He was propped up on pillows. He could barely lift his arm. But he was watching her face the way he always had. Reading her. He'd always been able to read her. "You look different today," he said. His voice was quiet now. A ghost of what it used to be. But the eyes, those green eyes, still sharp. Still him. "Good different or bad different?" she asked. "Just different." He studied her. "You've got something in your head." She smiled. She took his hand. "I had a good dream last night," she said. It wasn't entirely a lie. She had dreamed something beautiful. The two of them walking down a sunny street, each holding the hand of a small child. Her heart had ached with happiness even inside the dream. "What kind of dream?" "You were healthy. We were going somewhere together. With a child." A slow smile crossed his face. The real one. The one she loved. "Good dream," he said. "The best." She squeezed his hand. "Get some rest now." She kissed his forehead. She walked to the door. She turned back once and looked at him. And she thought, "I'm going to find this person. I'm going to go to Sosnovka. And I'm going to bring you back your family." The next morning, Vera was up before the alarm.
5:47 a.m.
The flat was quiet. She dressed quickly. Tracksuit, trainers, hair pulled back, cap against the sun. She had already arranged time off work. She had already called the investigators the night before and given them the instruction. Resume the search. But she wasn't going to wait. The train to Sosnovka left in just under an hour. She locked the door behind her. She walked into the spring morning. And she went to find her husband's brother. Sosnovka was bigger than she'd expected. Proper village. Wide main street. Old houses. Gardens just waking up for spring. Dogs barking from somewhere behind fences. The smell of wood smoke and damp soil.
Vera walked slowly.
She had made a mistake, she realized. She should have gone back to those nurses. Should have asked them exactly where this man lived. Which house? Which part of the village? But in the moment she had been too shaken to think clearly. And now she was here, in a village of several hundred people, looking for a face she had only seen in photographs of her husband. She walked for almost 2 hours. She studied every face she passed. Men, women. She was looking for Fyodor's cheekbones, Fyodor's forehead, Fyodor's way of moving. She found nothing. She was starting to lose hope. And then, a voice from behind her, dry, slightly amused. "You've been going back and forth on the street for an hour now." She turned. An old man, small and wiry, white hair like a cloud, short white beard, face darkened from decades of sun, eyes pale blue, sharp, very, very sharp. "You looking for something?" he asked. "Someone," she said honestly. "From here." "I think so." He studied her for a moment. Then he said, "Show me who." She pulled out her phone. Found the photo. The one from before the illness. Fyodor in the garden at her parents' house. Laughing at something off camera. Strong and healthy and beautiful. She held the screen toward the old man. He looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at her. "Sanka Petrov," he said. "Petrova. Petrov. The same family name." Vera's heart hammered so hard she almost couldn't hear. "You know where he lives?" The old man didn't ask questions. He didn't demand explanations. He just nodded slowly. And he led her there. The house was at the edge of the village. She saw it before she was even close. The tilting fence. The overgrown yard. Something that might once have been a garden. now returning to wildness. A heap of broken bottles catching the light near the outdoor toilet. Paint peeling off the wooden walls. A door that clearly hadn't been painted in a very long time. Vera stood at the gate. She pressed the buzzer. Nothing. She pressed it again. Still nothing. But she could hear the television inside. She could hear something being cooked. She knocked on the gate. Then harder. The latch gave. The gate swung open. She walked into the yard. Her heart was hammering. She told herself, if there's a dog, don't panic. If he's rude, stay calm. If he throws you out, find another way. She climbed the steps to the front door. She knocked on the frame. Come in, said a voice from inside. It was a man's voice, and it sounded, she could have sworn, almost like Fyodor. The smell hit her first. Damp walls, old wood, dust, and underneath it all, fried potatoes with onion. Simple, warm, unmistakably real. The rooms were cluttered and worn. Mismatched furniture. A porcelain cat missing one ear. Books swollen with age. An old tape player that probably hadn't worked in years. And everywhere, dishes, books, objects. The accumulated texture of a difficult life. A real cat appeared from somewhere. Curious. It looked at Vera, then went back to doing whatever cats do. In here, the voice called. She went into the kitchen, and she saw him, and her breath left her body completely. The same eyes. Fyodor's eyes. The same bones. The same line of the jaw, the brow, the set of the shoulders. A mole on the side of the neck. Exactly where Fyodor had one. But this man was different in the ways that life makes you different. The face older than it should have been. Deep lines around the eyes. A rough, uneven stubble. Reddened skin. The kind of eyes that have seen too much and slept too little. An old t-shirt. Worn trousers. He looked at her with no alarm. Just curiosity. Who are you? She started. And then stopped. Because she genuinely didn't know how to begin. He saved her. Sit down, he said. Nodded at the chair across from him. I was just about to eat. You hungry? She almost laughed. This man, this stranger who might be her husband's brother, was offering her fried potatoes. I don't know how to start explaining, she said honestly. Start from wherever you want, he said. Show me the picture first. She did. He took the phone from her. He looked at Fyodor's face for a long time. His expression was hard to read. But his hands, they were shaking slightly. I don't know him, he said quietly. But you noticed something. A pause. Yeah, he said. I noticed something. He set the phone down on the table. He looked up at her. His eyes were very careful now. Tell me the whole story, he said. From the beginning. And she did. She talked for a long time. He didn't interrupt once. She told him about the illness. About the diagnosis. About the months of watching Fyodor disappear. About the donor search. About the professor's words, prepare yourself. About the nurses and the smoke break and the word Sosnovka. And then she told him about Fyodor's past. About the children's home. About the investigators. About the name Larissa Yevgenyevna Petrova, from this village. About Fyodor stopping the search at the last moment. About the fear she had seen in him. The fear of finding out the truth. The man across the table listened to all of it. His face was very still. But his eyes, they were moving through something. Processing something. She could see it. When she finished, she said, I saw you and I didn't need a DNA test. You know that yourself. A long silence. Show me the photos again, he said. She did. He looked at each one slowly. A wedding photo. A casual holiday photo. One from just before the illness began. When she looked up from the phone, she saw that his eyes were wet. Not crying, but close. Is it him? She asked quietly. Is it really him? He set the phone on the table very gently. He looked at her. He said, My name is Alexander. A pause. And that? He tapped the screen. I think that's my brother. He got up. He poured 2 cups of tea. He sat back down. He said, Now I'll tell you my story, and then you can decide what you think. Vera wrapped her hands around the mug. She listened. Alexander was born into chaos. His mother, Larissa, was the kind of woman who moved through life like a beautiful, careless storm. Loud, impulsive, charming when she wanted to be, and completely indifferent to the consequences of her choices. She had children the way some people collect things without really intending to, without a plan. Multiple fathers. Nobody stayed. The household was jammed with people. Children sleeping wherever there was space. Thin walls. Old mattresses on floors. The constant smell of cigarette smoke and something being fried. Alexander had grown up as the only boy, surrounded by sisters, responsible for sisters. By age 8, he was carrying water from the public tap. By 10, he was cooking meals. By 12, he was the de facto head of whatever remained of the household. I used to dream about building a hut in the forest, he said, with a slight, sad smile. Just going there, living on berries and mushrooms, away from all of them. He paused. But I couldn't, because of Lenachka. Vera asked who Lenachka was. His face changed. My youngest sister, he said. She was different. Not like the rest of us. He searched for the right words. She didn't always understand things. She couldn't always read danger. She was gentle. She trusted everyone. She loved everything. He picked up his tea, put it down again without drinking. She needed looking after. Constant looking after. He was 8 years old, Vera thought. 8. And already guarding a child who couldn't guard herself. The story of the baby, the brother Alexander had always suspected he had, came out slowly. When Larissa announced she was pregnant again, the household had reacted with exhaustion and dread. Another one, another mouth, another body in an already unbearably small house. And Larissa herself had been matter-of-fact about it. She said plainly, she wasn't going to bring the baby home. She would sign the papers at the hospital. Let someone else take it. Alexander, 8 years old, full of desperate, inarticulate love, had begged her. Please, don't leave the baby. I'll look after it. I'll do everything. The adults at the table had laughed. His brother-in-law had ruffled his hair. You've got enough to do, kid. But Alexander had kept asking. Every day. Right up until the night the ambulance came. Larissa went into labor at a kitchen party. They barely got her out in time. When she came home a week later, thin, tired, smelling of hospital soap, she came home alone. Alexander had stared at her empty arms. Where is he? It was a girl, Larissa said. And she died. And she walked past him to the kitchen. He found out the truth 2 days later. He'd come inside to get water for the children playing in the yard. He froze in the doorway. His mother was at the kitchen table with her friend Klava. And Klava was saying, Maybe you should have brought the boy home after all. And Larissa said, Where would I put him, Klava? We're already sleeping on top of each other. Besides, maybe someone will take him while he's small. There are people who want babies. Alexander stood in the doorway, completely still. So it had been a boy, not dead, given away. His brother, the brother he had been promised. The brother he had already started loving before he was born. Gone. Given to strangers. Or to a children's home. Growing up somewhere alone. Not knowing he had a brother who had wanted him so badly. Who had begged for him. Who had lain awake at night imagining teaching him to fish, to whittle wood, to climb trees, to be less alone in the world. I cried for a long time after that, Alexander said quietly. He wasn't ashamed of it. I was 8, and it felt like the worst thing that had ever happened to me. What happened after that? Vera asked softly. Alexander's face tightened, and he told her about Lenotchka. She won't tell you every detail of that story, because it's almost too painful to repeat. A small girl, 7 years old, with a heart full of love for everything and everyone, and a mind that couldn't always protect her. Alexander had left her in the yard for 20 minutes. Just 20 minutes. He needed to go to the shop. Bread, pasta, milk. He thought his mother was at the neighbor's. He was 12 years old. He had been caretaking since before he could properly read. He came back. The gate was open. The yard was empty. They searched for 2 days. They found her at the lake. She had remembered their walks there. She had gone to a happy place. She hadn't understood the danger. Nobody had been there to stop her. I blamed myself for many years, Alexander said. Not defensively, just honestly. I still think about it. I still dream about it. Vera said nothing. There were no words for this. After that, the authorities got involved. Larissa lost her parental rights. The remaining children went to state care. Alexander and his older sister Sveta ended up in the same children's home. The younger ones were quickly adopted. A loving family took them. Alexander had always hoped they were happy. He had never been able to find out for certain. Sveta hated the home. She left as soon as she could. Alexander actually found it peaceful. Clean. Regular meals.
No chaos.
For the first time in his life, he felt like a child. But the peace didn't hold forever. When they aged out of care, Alexander and Sveta came back to Sosnovka. Their mother was dead by then. The house was half ruined. Sveta stayed a while, then left, found a man, moved to a city, stopped calling. Alexander stayed. He found odd jobs. He found vodka. The vodka helped him not think about Lenotchka, about the brother he'd never met, about the life that might have been. It gets easier with a drink, he said flatly. Until it doesn't. Until you're just less. He looked down at his hands. I'm not proud of it. Vera looked at him. This man. This broken, gentle, battered man. Who had wanted so desperately to protect people. Who had tried so hard with the tools he had. And who had been failed so completely by the people who should have kept him safe. She thought of Fyodor. Strong, certain, successful Fyodor. Who had climbed out of the same rubble. Who had made himself. The same blood. The same beginning. 2 completely different paths. And yet, something in both of them. The same warmth underneath it all. The same essential quality of caring. Fyodor had done it in abundance. Alexander had done it quietly, imperfectly, desperately. But he had done it. He had cared for Lenotchka until he couldn't. He had stayed when others left. He was still here. Still raising his sister's daughter. Still doing what he could with what remained. Vera looked at the door that led to the yard. The little girl, she said. Masha. Alexander smiled for the first time. A real unguarded smile. Sveta's daughter, he said. Sveta had her and decided she didn't want the responsibility. So she left her here? More or less. And you just kept her? What was I going to do? He shrugged. And in that shrug, in that simple, unquestioning what was I going to do, Vera saw it. The same thing that was in Fyodor. The bone-deep instinct to show up for someone. To not abandon. To not become what they had been raised by. She looked at this man. This messy, unkempt, unlikely man. With Fyodor's face and Fyodor's eyes. And she said, Alexander. He looked at her. Would you be willing to be tested? As a potential donor. He didn't hesitate. Not for a single second. He said, "That's not even a question." And Vera, for the first time in months, felt something a knot in her chest. A small, terrifying, precious thing. Hope. She asked him if he could come tomorrow. He said yes. She gave him the hospital address. She said she would meet him at the gate. He said he would be there. She left. She walked back through Sosnovka in the late afternoon. The same streets she had walked that morning in uncertainty. Now they felt different. The light was different. Everything was different. She sat on the train home with her hands folded in her lap. Her heart was still pounding, but not with fear this time, with something almost overwhelming. The size of it, the smallness of the thread that had led her here. 2 nurses, a smoke break, an overheard sentence, a village name, a face. If she had left the bench 5 minutes earlier, if the wind had been blowing the other way, if she had been crying too hard to hear, she would have missed it completely. She would have gone home, and waited, and prepared herself, and lost him. She pressed her forehead against the cold train window. She looked at the countryside passing outside, and she made a deal with whatever force had arranged all of this. Please let him match. Please let it work. Please. The next morning, she got to the hospital gate early. She waited. 8 minutes past the agreed time. She tried not to think about it. 9 minutes. 10. And then she saw him, coming around the corner. Alexander, cleaner than she had ever seen him, freshly shaved, a button-down shirt, his hair combed back. He was early by her watch. She had simply been earlier than him. He raised a hand when he saw her. She walked toward him. "You came," she said. "I said I would," he answered. Simply, matter-of-factly, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Like showing up for a brother he had never met was the easiest decision he had ever made. She led him inside. The tests took several hours. Afterward, Alexander asked if he could see Fyodor. "Can I meet him?" "He doesn't know yet," Vera said. "I didn't want to hope him up before I was sure." "I understand." "But yes," she said. "Come?" Fyodor was having a marginally better day. The new medication was buying him small fragments of energy. When he saw Vera come through the door, and then saw who was with her, his face went through about 6 expressions in 3 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, something cracking open, recognition. "Vera." His voice was barely above a whisper. "What?" "Fyodor," she said. "This is Alexander." She paused. "I think he's your brother." The silence in that small room was enormous. Alexander stood just inside the doorway. His jaw was tight. His eyes were very bright. He was looking at Fyodor the way you look at something you've been searching for your entire life. Fyodor looked back at him. And without a single word, because there were no words for this yet, they understood each other. Vera stepped quietly into the corridor. She sat on the plastic chair outside the door. She could hear low voices through the wall. She couldn't hear what they were saying. She didn't need to. She sat there with her hands in her lap and tears running down her face. Happy tears. The kind she had almost forgotten existed. 2 men. Born to the same careless, chaotic mother. Separated before one of them could walk. One raised by institutions and his own fierce will. One raised by poverty and chaos and the stubborn love of a frightened little boy. Both carrying the weight of a childhood nobody had prepared them for. Both somehow becoming good. Sitting on opposite sides of a hospital bed. Finally finding each other. The door opened. Alexander came out into the corridor. His eyes were red. He cleared his throat. "He wants to see you," he said. And then quietly, almost to himself, "I can't believe I finally." He stopped, pressed his lips together, nodded once, and said nothing more. He didn't need to. 3 days. The results would take 3 full days. Vera had never experienced 3 longer days in her life. She kept herself busy. She cleaned the apartment. She cooked things. She called Alexander to check on him. He had brought Masha back to the village. Vera thought about that little girl. 8 years old. Green eyes. Long dark russet hair. The image of Fyodor. Living with a well-meaning, struggling uncle. A mother who had chosen a new life and left her behind. Just like their mother had done to Alexander. Just like their mother had done to Fyodor. The same pattern. 1 generation later. Still running. On the morning of the 3rd day, her phone rang.
6:52 a.m.
Professor Astafive. She answered before the 2nd ring. Vera. Yes. I have your results. A beat. Just 1 beat. Alexander is an ideal donor match for Fyodor. She sat down on the floor. Not because she fainted. Just because her legs simply stopped holding her up. We can begin preparation for surgery immediately. Yes, she said. Yes, yes. Thank you. She hung up. She sat on the floor of her kitchen. The morning light coming through the window. The kettle starting to hiss. And she pressed both hands to her face and cried. And cried. And cried. The surgery was long. Complicated. There were difficult weeks afterward. Fyodor's body had to accept what his brother had given him. It did not do this easily. There were setbacks. There were nights when Vera sat in the hospital corridor at 3 a.m. and prayed. There were mornings when the doctors' faces told her nothing good and nothing bad. Just wait. Just wait. She waited. And then one day, several months after Alexander had walked into that hospital for the first time, Fyodor came home. He walked through the front door of the apartment. He stood in the hallway. He looked around at the familiar walls. And he said, I missed this. I missed every single thing about this place. Vera stood across from him. She couldn't speak. He looked different. Still thinner than he used to be. Still marked by what he had been through. But alive. Present. Back. He crossed the hallway and held her. She pressed her face into his shoulder. They stood there for a long time, not saying anything, not needing to. And here is the final twist. The one you didn't see coming. You remember Masha, the little girl, 8 years old, Alexander's niece, Sveta's daughter, left behind by a mother who chose to leave. Well, it was Alexander himself who brought it up. Sitting in the rehab center where Fyodor and Vera had insisted on placing him. Getting clean properly for the first time, he said to them one afternoon with great awkwardness and great hope, I've been thinking about Masha. They listened. Sveta isn't coming back. Not really. I know that now. He paused. And Masha, she talks about you too constantly. Every visit. Every phone call. Another pause. I just wondered. And you don't have to. There's no obligation. I'm just saying. Yes, said Fyodor. Alexander blinked. Yes. We want to. He turned to Vera. She was already nodding. Already trying not to cry again. We've wanted to for a long time, she said. 6 months later, Fyodor and Vera became Masha's legal guardians. Her mother, Sveta, didn't contest it. Didn't even show up for the hearing. In some ways, the pattern continued. But in other ways, it finally broke. Because Masha had a family now. A real one. A father who helped her with her homework and taught her to skate. A mother who cooked her favorite food and took her shopping for dresses. An uncle who visited every single week without fail. And a whole life ahead of her. Unmarked. Unbruised. Full of possibility. The morning Masha called Vera Mama for the first time. Casually, without meaning to, in the middle of talking about something completely ordinary. Vera had excused herself to the bathroom, where she stood at the sink, hands braced against the porcelain. and cried in a way she hadn't cried since the bench. But this time, from an excess of something she hadn't expected to find. Not just happiness, not just relief, but fullness, the feeling of a life suddenly, completely full. And Alexander, Fyodor's brother, the man who had been born wanting someone to be loyal to, who had spent his whole life showing up for people in conditions that would have broken most of us, who had never stopped being, underneath everything, the boy who begged his mother not to abandon the baby. Alexander got clean, properly clean. He started working again, found that he had extraordinary practical skill, an instinct for machinery, for fixing things, for making broken mechanisms work again. Fyodor got him a job, not as a favor, because Alexander genuinely had the talent. He moved to the city, bought a small apartment with the sale of the old Sosnovka house, split fairly with Sveta, everything above board. He was, for the first time in his life, starting completely fresh. And every single Sunday, the four of them ate dinner together. Fyodor, Vera, Masha, Alexander, a family assembled from fragments, from loss, from one overheard sentence on a hospital bench, from a little girl's desperate, unstoppable love for a man she'd only just met. You know what this story is really about? It's not about medicine. It's not about donor matches or blood types. It's about the things we almost don't do. Vera almost walked away from that bench. She almost left before the nurses came. The nurses almost didn't say anything at all. Fyodor almost never found out about his brother. Alexander almost didn't open his door. Almost is a terrifying word. Almost is everywhere in this story. And yet, one woman chose to go, to find the strength, to follow the thread, to go to a village she didn't know and knock on the door of a stranger's house and say, "I think you might be the person who saves my husband's life." And one man, beaten down by everything life had handed him, didn't hesitate, didn't ask what's in it for me, didn't weigh the inconvenience. He just said yes, because underneath everything, beneath all the damage and the grief and the vodka and the years of barely surviving, he was still the same boy who had begged his mother not to leave the baby. Still the same person who had carried Lenotchka. Still showing up. Still somehow choosing love. We carry our origins with us. Every single one of us. But we are not sentenced to them. Fyodor proved that. Alexander proved that. Just differently and later. And Masha, that little girl with the green eyes and the russet hair, she'll prove it too. In her own time. In her own way. The thread doesn't have to break just because the people who made you were broken. You get to decide where it goes next. If the story hit you somewhere real, just sit with that for a second. Because that feeling, that's the point. If you want more stories like this, real stories, human stories, stories that remind you what people are actually capable of, subscribe. I find these stories because I believe they matter. I tell them because some truths only land when they come wrapped in someone's real life. And I'm not stopping. Every week, another story, another person, another moment where everything almost went wrong. And then someone chose differently. Hit subscribe so you don't miss them. And leave me a comment right now, because I'm genuinely curious. What would you have done in Vera's place? Would you have left that bench? Would you have gone to Sosnovka? Or would the fear have been too much? There's no wrong answer. Tell me honestly. I read every single one. And next time, I'm bringing you the story of a man who came back after 15 years of silence. His family had already mourned him, had already said goodbye. And then he knocked on the door. What happened next will make you question everything you think you know about forgiveness. You do not want to miss it.